Thank you. I just, how can I say I feel at home? I don't know why. I don't speak your language. I'm grateful that you're allowing us to do the morning in English. I'm grateful for that. But I'll tell you why I feel at home. And I'm grateful to Lars for introducing the metaphor of the clearing. It is one that we have been using from the beginning in our work in narrative medicine. A clearing, as you know, in the forest is a space of safety. It's a space of protection. As the oak trees spread, oak in my country anyway, as the oak trees spread open and the ground is moss and ferns and there's a stream nearby and creatures can gather in some sense of not only safety, but also of sharing of this space. And so we have adopted the symbol of the clearing as a place within an otherwise possibly rather hostile forest of healthcare, where patients and nurses and social workers and physicians and administrators and even corporate interests from the pharmaceutical industry and in our country, the insurance industry, can gather, and the infants too, can gather so as to find our common purpose. And the clearing is very different from the kinds of divides that typically separate us. And more than anything, I feel it is our task to bridge these divides that typically separate us into often conflicting interests. It is not every patient who seeks care who feels that their doctors, nurses, social workers, administrators are on their side, as we all know. Another reason I feel very much at home is just the culture of the cultured nature of life here. At dinner last night, and this was among physicians and healthcare people, we didn't talk so much about physicians and healthcare. We talked about books. We talked about Alice Munro and Dylan winning the Nobel Prize. And only late in the dinner did someone have the temerity to ask me, and what about Trump? And still all I can do is weep in a soundless rage. In 2007, 2 doctors came to visit me at Columbia University in New York City. One was Valdemar Erlin, the other was a colleague cardiologist. And they came to give me news about a revolutionary practice in Gothenburg, where patients, as they were admitted to hospital, met all at one time with the doctor, the nurse, the nutritionist, the chaplain, the administrator, the physical therapist, the speech pathologist, who would be caring for them. And instead of the patient having to meet each of these individually, they met them all together. And the patient in that meeting was the guest of honor. And Valdemar told me this very modestly. And then he said, still modestly, so we have had to redesign our hospital and toward the effort of putting a room big enough for this team to meet on every one of the floors. He didn't realize how stunning this was, what a departure this was from the typical way of practicing hospital care. So, and then when I went to visit in 2011, it was an evening, I think it was a Sunday evening, and I went to visit and I sat in these rooms where patients and all those who cared for them not only met together, but shared the care of that patient. Shared. So the patient knew that everyone knew the same thing, that they were not fussing at one another, arguing about what to do, but that they were together affiliated with that patient. And even there, in a Sunday evening in the dark, somehow I could feel the spirit of this frontier work. I just showed Valdemar, I put that work in this new book we just published as the best example I knew of narrative medicine in action. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I feel so grateful that the work that we began at Columbia back at the turn of the century has taken shape toward not only ideas about equality, justice, collaboration, communication, but also ways in which these things become manifest. And it's only when they're manifest, when they are visible, when they are in practical use that alters the otherwise sometimes deadly routines of ours. It's only then that we know what the ideas can do. This is a photograph by Sebastião Salgado, the Brazilian photographer. I hope you know his work. And we see a river, we see a landscape, we see two sides of that river. They're different, aren't they? The two sides, how are they different? Somebody holler back to me. What's different about those two sides of the river? Yeah, I mean, say what? Yes, indeed. The mountains are flat on one side, but, oh, shoot. I'm sorry. I figured it's 6 a.m. back home. Who's calling me? So on one side, they're rather steep and perilous looking, and on the other side, they're rather gentle and sloping, huh? And then they're divided by a very bright light, a bright line, right? A bright line. Well, I think about landscapes of health all the time, and this occurred to me as an apt metaphor for the landscape, where all of us are on this territory, but some of us on the west side of this river are healthy, and some of us on the east side of this river are ill. And it's those on the east side of the river who have to carry the burdens of risk, of danger, of maybe falling, while those of us on the west side of the river are cozy within our own health. So this is one way to think about the divides in healthcare. Very simply, the divides between those who need care and those who are trained to deliver it. And as many of you know, the harder it is to be trained in a healthcare discipline, the more that healthcare professional feels that he or she is on level ground. You follow? I grew up in medicine at a time when interns and residents had to stay up for 40 hours at a time, and we were on call all the time, and we never slept, we never ate, and we thought we were immortal. We figure we're so close to all this illness, all this death, we must be immune to it. And I think that holds for a lot of us. So this is one of the divides that we have to conquer, is not the right word, but heal. Which is to say, we are all human, we all have bodies, we are mortal, and we will die. And once we come to know that, we can do good work. This is another kind of divide. What do you see? What is this?
Borderline thing.
It's indeed, it's a borderline, it's a border, it's razor wire, right? It could be in a prison in the United States. It could be at a border between warring states. Sadly, there are many places where this could be. This happens to be, this was March 2015 on the cover of the Atlantic magazine. It was the border between Greece and Macedonia at the time of the refugee insurgents. So borders are not always passable. There are some borders that one cannot get across without injury. And I want to remind us that there are borders like that in healthcare. There are borders like that in our country where persons who don't have insurance cannot get across the border to their heart transplant, to their advanced treatment for some kinds of cancer. Do you see? I hope there are fewer razor wire borders here in this country, but we forget that many people, however decent our intention, are denied a kind of care that could help them. And it's not only in terms of money, but it can be in terms of bias, prejudice of all kinds. The kinds of razor wire divides include divides of language, religion, culture, as well as class. So let us not forget that our clearings are not always open in full social justice to everyone. And from the start, the work in narrative medicine has been ultimately committed to social justice. Now, here's a lovely divide. This is the Green River in Utah, USA. And you see how this river meanders. And so, I don't know, do I have a who's it's? Yeah. So again, there's a west side of the river and the east side of the river. But look at how from the west side of the river you get all the way over here into the east. Do you see that? And then if you're on the east side of the river, look how far you can penetrate into the west, huh? So this kind of invaginated border shows that even though separated, and again, the west side of the river is health, the east side of the river is illness. And yet, in this conception, there's free flow. They're separate, but they come into one another's territory. They are not strangers to one another. And I find that a more hopeful metaphor for where we'd like to get. Indeed, those of us who care for patients on the whole are rather quite healthy, and those who come to us for care, many are indeed healthy and just trying to get healthier, but some are not. Some are very ill. Some are close to the end of their lives. So it's not helpful to pretend there's no distinction. But keep in mind, please, the Green River. And here's even a more hopeful picture. Those of you who grew up with histology somewhere along the line know that this is a cell. These are cell membranes separating one cell from its neighbor. But if you, those of us who know about what happens at cell membranes know that there is constant tonic traffic between one cell and the other. Water, electrolytes, salt, all kinds of substances flow from one cell to the other. And this reminds me about the more intimate ways in which doctors and patients, nurses and patients, social workers and patients can be in contact. That it's not just that we're on opposite sides of the river but close at hand, but also when the work is very well going, that we influence one another, that our membranes, yes, the skin around us, our membranes are permeable to one another. This is so important. I hope you know what I mean by permeable. That if I'm with a patient, my knowledge, my ideas, my emotions, my attachment to this patient crosses the skin, mine and the patient's. Do you see? And that the patient's mood and worries and strengths and assets and desires permeate to enter me. Do you see? So that we become, in biological terms, a syncytium. Now that's not me. That's a nicer ring, but we become a syncytium, which means like one cell with two members in it. So this is kind of the dream of narrative medicine, that we become in contact. Now, I so appreciate the icon for this conference that Valdemar and his artists and photographers gave us for the conference. There are two persons there. There are two bodies there. And they're very close in contact. They're not one, they're two. But you see the contact, and even do you see in the logo of the narrative medicine, it looks kind of like Wi-Fi. Those, what do you call them? The kind of broadcasting waves, yes? So that these two are bathing one another with communicating, transmitting waves. Are you with me? So that all that's within each of us as bodies can indeed be emitted and received by the other. I don't want to sound like a mystic. This is not spooky. This is how human relation works. And what we know about human relation in families, in love, in war, what we know about human relations exists within our practice, within the office, within the emergency room, within the hospital. We know this. And to have an icon of indeed how it works is very powerful. So we thank this conference for that. Now, another way of talking about healthcare is two people sitting in a room together doing something, right? Now, sometimes there's 8 people sitting in a room together doing something, but a lot of the time it's 2, isn't it? You're there with a patient, maybe with a family member, maybe with an interpreter if you don't speak the same language. Here's 2 people in a room doing something, right? You recognize this. This is Cézanne's one of many in the series of card players. And he took very seriously this series of paintings. He hired as the models for the card players the workers on his father's farm in southern France. And he called them peasants. Indeed, they were farm workers. And he had the same feeling toward the workers, almost as he had toward the land itself, that they represented for him the timeless, eternal qualities of the Pyrenees in southern France. But here there's 2 guys sitting at a table where they're playing cards. We don't know how high the stakes are. It's a silent picture. There's a bottle of wine in the back. They're looking rather reflective. It's a moment. It's a human moment. Now, the one on the right is, I think, the same person. The one on the left is a new one. Looks a little more sinister to my view, right? It's darker. Maybe there's more at stake in this game. And there's another dozen or so of these paintings. Each of them slightly different, each of them capturing two men in a room doing something together. All right? Now, here's what Merleau-Ponty, the phenomenologist, says about these paintings. The artist is the one who arrests the spectacle in which most men take part without really seeing it, and who makes it visible to the most human among them. Now, do you see? This is what we do as clinicians. We arrest the spectacle. We arrest ordinary events in life that are not seen to be spectacles, but we know they are. We know when we're with a patient, no matter what the issue is, that there is something of great moment going on. There is something of heightened stakes going on. And it is our duty, I'm now casting the clinician in the role of the artist, because it is our duty to arrest, capture that spectacle, recognize its heightened meaning. And it's a spectacle that most people seeing it would not notice. Do you understand? This feeling when you're in the office of, this moment is a turning point in this person's life. I'm telling this person that her ejection fraction is 19% and that we know she'll need a heart transplant. Or maybe I'm telling something very simple, like, your cholesterol is great. Just keep taking your simvastatin. But all of them are seminal, heightened moments of great importance. And the more we can, forgive me for sounding a little religious now, but the more we can sanctify those moments and realize their importance, the better we fulfill our responsibilities. Further, we have, like the artist, the duty to make this visible to those around us, to continue to in our own work. And this is why we're going to be talking about writing, about sharing some of the stories that we come to know, that it's our duty to in some way capture and represent that which we come to know about the stakes of the work. So here's, I've just listed some of the features, some of the principles that arose in narrative medicine. I said from the beginning that its task was to recognize, absorb, interpret, and be moved to action by stories of illness. This is not passive work. This is activating work. This is elevating work. This is mobilizing work. That we're not passive listeners, but rather are moved to action on behalf of the patient by what we hear. I want to go out of my way to say that this work arose from the practice of primary care. It was really from general medicine, ordinary day in, day out, work in the office, taking care of people over the long haul. My practice spans 35 years, so there are people I started taking care of when they were in their 30s, and now they're hitting 70, and I'm still their doctor. And this is where all of these ideas arose, and it arose at the same time from narrative theory, from literary theory. I was getting my PhD in English at the same time, and I was realizing how important it is to be practicing medicine with a very sophisticated understanding of what stories do. What does one need in order to fulfill the duties incurred by virtue of having heard a complex narrative? I say they're relational, phenomenal, and creative. Relational being, please remember my cell membrane. That we become permeable to one another. That is in the relations, the hard-won relations, the intimate relations, that we come to know enough about the persons we're caring for to care for them. And simultaneously and reciprocally that they know something about us. Not unduly, unprofessionally, but that they come to know and be able to rely on the ways in which we care for them. I put creative there because this work must be done with the imagination. You know that illness is very mysterious. It's not like we know what the problem is. We don't. And we typically have to keep asking ourselves, as physicians, as diagnosticians, as psychotherapists, what in the world could this be? And our work as diagnosticians is stronger if we do not go according to algorithmic drills. Yes? If this, then that. If not this, then this. Rule out this, this, and this. Instead of first, thoughtfully, with some time, listening. I usually start my visits with a new patient by saying, tell me, I say, I will be your doctor. I need to know a lot about your body, your health, and your life. Please tell me what you think I should know about your situation. And then I've learned to stop talking. And they tell me. And it's not always about health and pills and operations and allergies. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. It's about life. And they get to the end and they say, you let me talk, you know? So the creative part is in having the skill to enter into that narrative world that is being given, as if you're reading a short story by Alice Munro. You enter in. She says when she reads a story, it feels like she's entering a house. Well, there we go. So we enter the house of this life, of this patient, not just looking for the appendectomy scar, but looking for the meaning of it, the values that govern it, the beauty there, the unusual, singular, never to be seen again aspects of this particular life. And so, the co-construction of narratives. This is a little spooky for my medical students who feel inept and not up to the task of co-constructing with patients. But indeed, as ideas of the illness or health of a patient emerges, it emerges within the frameworks that are offered by the interviewer, the interlocutor, the clinician. And you know, as well as I, that one patient will, if a patient visits Dr. A and Dr. B, when the patient visits Dr. A, maybe that doctor uses a very conventional, what are your illnesses, what are your hospitalizations, what are your medicines, what are your allergies, and then, as you know, we start at the top and walk down. Do you have headaches? Do you have trouble with your vision? Do you have trouble with your hearing? Do you have trouble with your swallowing? I'm sure you've all had these interviews. And then maybe Dr. B will use a more open approach and say, I need to know what's bothering you. Well, the patient leaving Dr. A will leave with a different set of diagnoses and plans than will the patient leaving Dr. B. You see? Radical. It's radical. And my students say, no, isn't there a right thing to do? I have to tell them, no, you're there. You are framing not only how many milligrams of simvastatin to give, but literally what the problem is. And then the commitment to social justice is foundational. And we, all over the world, in some areas more than others, have to always, in our minds, say access, equality, that health is one of the grounds upon which prejudice and discrimination cannot apply. And as you know, it is highly unjust in many ways. These are the three movements that I've, from the beginning, paid attention to. These are not sequential, but all kind of happen at once. The attention is the capacity really to offer heightened, undiluted focus on a patient and her illness. The representation reminds me to tell you that we've learned in our work the critical nature of capturing in some kind of form the situation of the patient. That when we write about the patient, just in our own notes, I'm not talking about becoming novelists, no. I'm not talking about publishing, no. I'm talking about when we try to understand what we know about a patient. The most direct way to do so is to write it down. Because I call this talk the shock of attention. When you can really pay attention, helping yourself by capturing what you've learned in some kind of form. For me, it's writing. For others, it may be drawing. I don't care. But some kind of form, artistic form, that's when we discover that which we know. I'll give you an example in a minute. And then the affiliation is that toward which we strive. That's the outcome of importance. The partnership, the advocacy, the I am behind you, I am your agent, I am here for your best interests. This is the affiliation, and that's how it works. This is Salgado. Again, I just have, this is a Tuareg woman from northern Sahara. She's partially blind. And I am riveted by this image. I don't know if it's dark enough in this hall to see, but I hope you see how this woman, this face, is the only thing in the universe. The heightened focus, as we look at her. Nothing matters but she. Yes? This is what I mean by attention. That we donate ourselves as it's almost like a vessel. Henry James calls it the great empty cup of attention, the vessel that will capture, receive, contain that which the patient has to say and to show. This is what we mean by attention. This is Salgado also, and I love the photo because you can't exactly see what it is. It may be that some of you who are close in the auditorium look at the top part of that photograph. Maybe if you're in the back, maybe you look at it and it looks like kind of a cloudy sky with clouds. Whereas if you're sitting up close, it may look more like trees. Do you see how it's ambiguous? Well, when I first saw it, he had an installation called Genesis in New York where this was. It's not like he was a bad photographer and couldn't represent accurately what he saw. Rather, he represented accurately the ambiguity. The fact that you couldn't quite tell, was it clouds or was it trees? He represented accurately the ambiguity, you see? So when I say representation, I don't mean writing a report. I don't mean necessarily recording. I mean, like Salgado, capturing the mystery, the ambiguity, the puzzlement that is often within us as we do this work. Rushing toward certainty, prematurely rushing toward certainty is always a bad thing. But how difficult it is, not just for my little medical students, but for all of us, to tolerate the doubt that Salgado is tolerating. Is it trees? Is it clouds? Tolerating the doubt. Is it angina? Is it GERD? Tolerating the doubt until you can gradually see your way to a clearer picture. So that's what representation does for us. And here's a Salgado picture, I think, of affiliation. I mean, there's a lot of boats. You can't tell, is this ominous? Are they escaping from something? Is it a Pacific early morning mist where they're just on their way to work? They're poling these boats, right? It's a shallow river, no doubt. They're poling their way on the bottom. Oh, goodbye. Come back, little one. Okay. Bye. And what I just appreciate about the photo is that there's two guys in each boat. All right? And it just reminds me that when we're with patients, especially in a narrative contract, a narrative clearing, that our task is to accompany them, to be in the boat with them, to accompany them. Yes? So this is Mary Cassatt, American painter. This is a pastel. The original is tiny, tiny, tiny. It's like 4 inches square. It's very tiny. And I chose this as the cover of the first book because it seemed to typify for me the attention that I'm hoping we all can achieve. And it reminds me, I saw a patient not long ago. The patient himself was very old, 92. He had advanced dementia. He, for years, could not talk, could not respond, could not recognize persons. He had a tracheostomy to help him breathe. He had a duodenal tube to feed him. He was wheelchair bound. He could only emit rather sharp noises to signal, we thought, that he was uncomfortable. And he was admitted to hospital for pneumonia. And in the process, the doctors asked the family to sign the do not resuscitate. You know what that is? Well, the family got enraged. He's pounding in my office afterwards, he's pounding my desk. He's saying pounding, he's enraged, the son is. He says, those doctors did not think my father was worth taking care of. You see that? To ask him to sign, I don't want to be resuscitated, was equivalent to abandoning him. And the son almost took the father out of the intensive care unit. He at least had the sense to let him stay there, and the father got a little better. So in my office, and this was the first time I had met this family. So here's this very, very impaired patient, clearly close to the end of his life, and this enraged, middle-aged son who was abandoned by his other physicians. And, I could have done a lot of things. I could have explained the nature of do not resuscitate. And I could have taken the side of the other hospital. Or I could have gotten angry with the patient and said, how dare they do that? But I didn't do any of that. I just I just said very kind of softly, tell me stories about your father. And then the son did it. And he told me they grew up in the Dominican Republic. They owned a big family farm. This son was the favorite of his father of 8 sons. See? And that father taught this son all he needed to know about the farming, the tilling, the sowing, the choosing the crops, the harvesting, the marketing, all that he needed to know about this. So I could see, and by now the son is calm. He's sitting in the chair. He's now leaning forward to tell me more about his father. And then he said at the end, we know my father's dying. We just want him to be as comfortable as he can to the end. So what it showed me is that using these narrative method allowed this son to honor his father. In the hospital, he felt he was being asked to betray his father. And here now, with a very simple act, he had the chance to honor him. And so the father went back home. We had set up home care. The nurses came every day. The feeding was done. And the son was now somewhat more a partner in the care and not on the other side of that razor wire. Do you see? Okay. I'm back to this Salgado. In closing, let me just ask, does anyone know what my last name means in Greek mythology? You do? Yeah. Charon. Charon is the boatman, the ferryman who rows the boat across the river Styx to Hades. So in Greek mythological terms, when you die, you enter my boat. I exert a fee, and I bring you from the land of the living to the land of the dying, or the land of the dead. My name is French-Canadian, it's French, and originally c'est Charon avec 2 R en mid, so that it was Charron, and that means a wheelwright, one who makes carriages, which was my family's occupation in France. And so we lost an R someplace before the St. Lawrence River, and I had to live with this name, and there are many other Dr. Charons in my family. I was a medical student on the wards at one of the Harvard teaching hospitals, and a patient recognized my name. He was 26. He had a hepatocellular carcinoma. He was dying. He sees my little red name tag, and he says, "So this is it." And he died 2 days later, big pulmonary hemorrhage, bleeding in his lungs. I was, of course, stunned, shocked, appalled, repentant that I had made his last few days all the more suffering. And I vowed to change my name. I did not, in part because of the family of Dr. Charon's that I didn't want to be separated from. And I came slowly to understand that this was a name I had to live up to. That this is what I do, that this river is what I have to know. The currents, the hazards, the submerged reefs, the shores, the place of embarkment, the place of disembarkment, that was my task, to come to know this river of life which ends in death, and be prepared as well as I can to accompany others on that journey. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop not in the, how can I say this? We're not on the river yet. We all in this room have indeed, I hope, share my own commitment to come to know this river and to be able to protect our passengers, to be able to compassionate with our passengers, to be able to be in the same literal boat with them, not on opposite sides of razor wire or even that river of separation, but rather one with those who come to us for care, knowing we will need care eventually, and together reveling in the protection of that clearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for this warm, reflective, and very inspiring talk you have had to us. And I think you really hit the core of working in healthcare and meeting in healthcare. And regardless of what profession you belong to, and also showing the meeting from both the patients and the professional caregivers. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We have time, right?
Yeah, we have time for a few questions. We have a microphone. So please, if someone has a question, don't hesitate. And you can, if you feel uncomfortable, om ni hellre vill framställa frågan på svenska så går det bra. Vi kan hjälpa till att översätta så att Rita will understand.
I understand not a word, but I know what he said is please speak in Swedish if you like. Please.
I have a comment, if I may. I'm a midwife.
Yeah, the microphone. Maybe we can take your question first, since you have the microphone.
Okay.
And
Is
then
that okay?
pass it along.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so. Is it on? No, it's on. Yeah. Thank you so much for this inspiring talk. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Linköping University. And I was wondering, I really appreciated your the example in the beginning where you talked about how you gather around one patient and listen to their story. And I was wondering, how would you think about, or could you comment on then, because when we give or when we present a narrative or a story, we also do that to a specific audience.
Yes.
And you could have, that audience could have different interpretations of that narrative. So how would we negotiate that in that context? How would you think, like, how do we deal with that in our everyday life and practice?
Do you mean among the members of a team?
Yeah, and also in relation then, of course, to the patient and how
Yes.
we deal with it.
Yes.
So what's the accurate?
Yes.
And I know that I also agree there is no accurate. There's always a co-construction here.
Yes.
How do we kind of
Yes.
in practice?
Indeed. So you got to the core of the matter, which is, your question is about the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Okay? And so what a hazard to assume in practice that one auditor can appreciate the full nature of the reality. So that by having everyone in the same room, or at least having people with enough respect and solidarity that they can share different perspectives, we develop the different perspectives at the same time, thereby not hazarding the reductive error of seeing only from your vantage point. So on next Tuesday, when I'm back in New York, I have to run a session for our medical students at Columbia on the nature of the healthcare team. So what did I do? I mean, I invited a nurse practitioner who is going to present the case of a severely ill infant who was cared for at our hospital. And then we hear from the speech pathologist who cared for that patient. And then we hear from the social worker in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit where that child was born, about the care of the patient and the family. And then we hear from the pediatric resident, and then if there's time, from one of the third-year medical students. Do you see? So that we're giving them not one story, but 6 stories, and leaving it to them to see the complexity of not choosing which one to pay attention to, but rather incorporating multiple, often contradictory stories.
And what's the response? Could you give, like, the medical students response to that?
We now offer seminars at Columbia for students from 8 different schools, all at once. Medicine, nursing, dentistry, public health, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nutrition, and chaplaincy. And we invite them all to take courses. One is on the end of life, one is on issues of justice in healthcare, and we don't have room for enough. They know, they need to learn together. It's us old folk who are on razor wire. Yes?
And we have one more
We have a question
over
there.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah, we have one.
I'm a midwife. I work in.
Yes, no.
I think we
Yes.
can hear you.
Oh, very good. Maybe I can. Can you hear me without it? There we go. It's working. I'm a midwife. I work in Karolinska, and I just wanted to say that I got so excited about one sentence that you said a while ago. The one was, to be able to help, I need to know, and so on. As a midwife, we work with stories, you probably know. But also I have a new job from this year, and that's to gather data and stories from quality registers. So it's electronic, but it's about after you've had the baby and the perineum. So if you have a problem there, it's extremely difficult for the patient. And I found this window that they may declare in the survey problems. When you ring them up, everything is fine. And I felt, what sentence can I say in that brief moment to reach out to the woman? And I think you gave it to me. To be able to help, I need to know. Thank you.
And I'm thrilled to. I think that midwifery is one of the professions and one of the offerings of healthcare that most exemplify a being with. The midwife that I work with, she's a nurse midwife. She's now my student. We have a Master of Science in Narrative Medicine course at Columbia. You can get a master's in narrative medicine. It's a year long. It's very intensive. It teaches you everything in this book. And she is one of my students. She's taking the narrative medicine degree. She's also teaching one of the seminars for all the different students of health, because her practice as a midwife shows, as best as anything I can think of, this cell membrane permeability, that the midwife is more than the rest of us on the side of the woman and able to appreciate the many aspects of birth and its outcomes and its aftermath in ways that transcend the assignment of diagnostic categories. So to feel that I have partnered with you in your work is thrilling. Thank you.
And we have one more question.
Okay. My name is Staffan Josephson. I'm the one with the baby back here. I'm professor in occupational therapy, and so I'm very much interested in everyday practices and what we do. And a lot of what we do in healthcare is about transformation of the everyday because of health problems or whatever we encounter. So I had a question about how we can reflect about the relation between the lived stories, the stories we do, and the everyday practice and the stories we tell.
Yes, absolutely. I hope you know the work of Cheryl Mattingly, the anthropologist at USC, who, as a narratologist, has found most inspiration through very careful witnessing of the practice of occupational therapists, to the point that she was offered an appointment. She's now professor of occupational therapy, as well as professor of anthropology. And when she came as our guest at Columbia, it was the School of Medicine and the program of occupational therapy together. And this is one way of saying the work of the occupational therapist and the physical therapist unfolds over time and abuts ordinary life in ways that my practice as an internist does not do. And so it is the occupational therapist and the physical therapist who not just row the boat, but walk the path, literally walk by the side of the patient. Cheryl argues, and I agree, that many of the stories that need to be heard are wordless, that it's in the body itself. It's the body itself that tells the stories that need to be heard, that need to be witnessed, that need to be interpreted by the attentive healer. And it's as that body, say after a big stroke, after an amputation, after a brain tumor, after the hand gets mangled in the table saw, it's after that the patient says, what? I have a new life? What? I'm not the person I used to be? Who am I now? Who is this stranger? And it's that therapist who is able, gradually, with such attention, to introduce that patient not to a new life, but simply to the continuation of this old life of mine, now with different challenges, features, prostheses, ways of speaking after aphasia, whatever it may be. Do you see? Do you see how that careful, slow work responds to deep stories that the patient can't tell but can embody? It's a brilliant. It's more than an image, an instance of the work that all of us do when we're working at our best. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have to close this part now, and as a little token of our gratitude, do you see what it is?
No. What is it?
You see?
It's a hand.
It's a hand. Oh. It's a linen towel.
It's a hand. Beautiful.
With a hand.
Beautiful. The hand of us all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now, just before we take a very short break, I would like to introduce Ola Sigurdsson could you just rise up? And Ola will lead the panel talk here at 11 o'clock. And you are a professor of systematic theology and a director of the Center for Culture and Health at Göteborgs Universitet. Is that right? Yeah. And you have, I understand, for a long time been very interested in developing the multi- and cross-disciplinary discussions and research. And you hope to establish a field that internationally is called medical humanities, or maybe narrative medicine as a part of that. And you have established this, I think, in Gothenburg. And you see this as a very important area for critical reflection. And with that background, I think you will be a perfect leader for our talk in 10 minutes. So please don't go far away. There are 5 or 6 toilets on that side. And please be back here.